Hey guys, guess what? If you've been paying attention to the remote learning guide, then you will see that today is our last lecture. You guys have officially, I guess I should say after this lecture, made it through Animal Science 2, Small Animal. And y'all have done an outstanding job. So today we're going to finish up with Amphibians and Reptiles. It's basically like such a small little section of material. We're just going to knock it all out in one go, and it's only 20 slides, so it's not that bad. When we get done, y'all are going to have a Venn diagram assignment, kind of comparing and contrasting fish, amphibians, and reptiles. So let's go on ahead and get into it. So we're going to start out with amphibians. So frogs and toads. The difference between a frog and a toad is gonna be their skin. A frog is gonna have really, really smooth, slick skin, and they're gonna be found near water. Frogs are gonna live like kind of half in, half out of water. And then toads, they're gonna have the rough and bumpy skin, and they're gonna live on land. Toads have bumpy skin so that they can kind of blend in with like the rocks and the soil clumps. It's kind of like their own little camouflage. Frogs, they're smooth and shiny and slick so that they can blend in with the rocks and stuff that are on the waterbed. Frogs will make like a bigger croaking kind of noise. Like if you've ever heard of bullfrogs, those are definitely a thing. Frogs are also going to have like a lot longer bodies. They're going to be like bigger, they're going to be agile, they're going to be really quick to move, whereas toads are kind of like literally a bump on the log. Some frogs can actually grow to be like 14 inches long, and this is going to be where we're talking about the bullfrog. They're like super muscly, and honestly, coming from the country, we eat frogs. Frog legs, they're delicious. Taste just like chicken, but better. So, and then the green tree frog. We've all kind of seen them. They're really cute. They're kind of slimy, but they've got like really big eyes. And normally I would always find them like stuck to our doors or the houses, or the side of the houses back home. They'll have like, if you look really close, they'll have like this really skinny little yellow stripe running from its lower jaw down to its back. Kind of like racing stripes, because they're pretty fast if you've ever tried to catch them. Then we've got newts and salamanders. These guys are kind of like lizards, but slimier. They can be anywhere from like a few inches long to like 5 feet or more, depending on the breed. But they're gonna typical kind of lizard look, 4 legs, long tails. They're gonna prefer a kind of a moister environment, because if you look at the skin will tell you what kind of environment they like. Smooth, shiny skin means that they like a moist environment. If they have really dry skin or bumpy skin, then they're gonna prefer a drier environment. So, amphibians, cold-blooded. Cold-blooded means that the animal cannot produce their own heat. We are warm-blooded, meaning we can produce our own heat. Our body kind of shakes when we get cold. That's our body's way of trying to like heat us up. Amphibians, that doesn't work for them. They get all of their heat from like the sun, basically, or somewhere warm, like a warm rock, or the road. When the sun shines on the road all day and it gets nice and warm. They have to get their heat source from somewhere else. So if you keep them as pets, you have to have some kind of light source in there so that they're able to stay warm. And then, yeah, most of them, they're going to live in moist environments. Again, you look at the skin of them, you can tell. Do they need a moist environment? Do they need a dry environment? Amphibians, also one of the key differences is that amphibians don't have scales. They can have smooth skin, they can have rough and bumpy skin, but they do not have scales. And amphibians, the way that they eat, they're gonna crush their prey with their strong little jaws, and then they're gonna swallow it whole because they don't have teeth. Because again, kind of scary if they had teeth. Amphibians live part of their life in water, like the beginning part of their life starts in water. Think of like frogs and tadpoles. Then as the tadpole grows, it starts sprouting these little bitty legs, its little tail ends up falling off, and it will end up transitioning from living fully in the water to living on the land. And some amphibians, depending on, again, smooth skin, bumpy skin, some of them may still live close to the water, some of them may live like solely on the land. And then reptiles. First one, boa constrictor. Boa constrictors are really popular pets because they adjust to captivity pretty well. And they're relatively easy to tame. They can end up growing to 18 feet long. It's a big snake. If they get to that point, they're probably going to end up moving on from their normal diet of small animals like rats and mice, birds, fish, and eggs. A common garter snake. These snakes, super harmless. You can find them in the wild pretty easily. They also make decent pets. They adjust to captivity. They can be tamed. And they're easily recognized by the stripes running down their back. They've got one main one heading down its back, and then it's got two on the side. And they're only going to end up growing to 2 to 3 feet. So a much more appropriately length snake for a pet, if you ask me. So we'll go back for a second. If you decide that you want to get a snake as a pet, something that you have to keep in mind is the snake's natural environment. Before I got to Jordan, I think a couple years before, there were other snakes other than Nagini that we had there. And they were kept in those huge fish tanks that, if you remember, were in the back of my classroom. Because, yeah, they do make pretty good cages. The thing is that if the environment isn't perfect for the snake can get so stressed out to the point that it will literally die. It's going to stop eating. It's going to lose its will for life because it's so stressed out that something is going to get it. So snakes like a garter snake, they need places to hide. They need all kinds of like cracks and crevices and brush. They need all these different things so that they're able to feel like they're in their natural environment. If they feel like they're exposed, then they're not going to eat because, honestly, it takes a little while for a snake to eat something because it has to eat it whole. It doesn't have teeth. So whatever it is that they're eating, they got to eat it whole. And that can take like 5 minutes to an hour. It can take a while. That's a long time for an animal to be like even more susceptible to an attack than if it were just out in the middle of the open anyways. So if they feel like they're exposed, then they're not going to eat. If they're not going to eat, obviously they're not going to live very long. So you have to keep the snake's environment as it should be if it were not in a tank. Continuing on with the reptiles, getting into the lizards. The first one is the green anole. It's classified as an iguana. You can find them in pet stores. They only get to be like 8 inches long, so they make pretty good pets. They're pretty quick on their feet though, and then they do eat insects, so crickets, grasshoppers, stuff like that. Super good meal for them. You just want to make sure that your tank is escape proof because these little guys, they like to crawl, they like to climb, they like to explore. And they can slightly change colors from the green to, they can kind of darken it to get to a brown or lighten it a little bit to get to a gray. Not like super crazy kind of change colors like a chameleon, but they can kind of change colors. Skinks, you find these outside all the time. These little fellows live outside of my parents' house. I would see them like every single day. Skinks, they make pretty good pets, supposedly. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I grew up with them being wild creatures. They did not want to be caught. They didn't want to be messed with. And the thing about these little guys is that if you catch them by their tail, they can literally make their tail fall off. It's an escape mechanism. You will be left with literally just a little blue tail. And their tail is going to end up regrowing slowly over time. So, I don't know about it. There's probably other breeds of skinks that you can keep as pets, but I don't really see this one as being like a great pet. Some skink breeds can end up reaching over 2 feet long. They're secretive, they like to burrow, they like to hide. Some other breeds can make pretty good pets. Then we've got the Savannah monitor. This is a Savannah monitor as a little baby. And this is when it is working on growing. It can go up to 6 feet long. This is a big old lizard. He's not going to be very easy to handle when it gets 6 feet long or even 3 feet long. This is like a baby, basically. Like, you're going to have to hold this thing. But they're pretty cool pets. Just got to keep in mind how big they are. That jaw ain't playing no games. If that thing decides to bite you, it is gonna hurt. Then we have the chameleon. You can get chameleons as pets. They're only gonna end up growing to about 10 inches long. So I consider anything under a foot long like a pretty good reptile amphibian pet. I don't want anything too big. Granted, I also don't really want a reptile or amphibian, period, but. And then we all know that they can change their colors to adapt to their surroundings. They're naturally green, so their natural environment, they're going to be wanting something green because it does cost a lot of energy and a lot of effort for them to be able to change colors. If they're scared, they want to be able to blend in. So you want to give them somewhere where they feel comfortable. So these next couple slides are just pictures that a post I came across on Facebook, and you can read it if you want to. You can pause the lecture and you can read it. But basically, what happened was this iguana, my bad. This chameleon came in and she wasn't pregnant, but they're kind of like chickens where they're still going to lay eggs even if the eggs are not fertilized. However, this girl, she came in, she was a little bit on the older side, and her eggs had basically become impacted. She became what's known as egg bound, where she can't get the eggs out of her. It's going to require surgery. If you can't leave the eggs in there, it's just not something that you can really do. So it is recommended that if you get like a pet lizard, that you do get them spayed if they're a female, so that this does not become an issue. So this is what the chameleon looked like when she was first brought in. She's looking a little on the big side, pretty uncomfortable. And being egg bound is also pretty common with lizards like bearded dragons and iguanas. So what they did, they anesthetized the iguana. This is just kind of the makeshift you got to do when you have such a small little patient. They anesthetized her, they made the incision, and this is where they start pulling out the eggs. This is a Q-tip, so this is how small the eggs are. The eggs just, they keep on coming. You can see how many there are down there. And this is a picture after with all of her eggs She's all stitched up, looking much better, looking much more comfortable. They did say, I think in the intro, that like she did make a full speedy recovery and that she was all good. But I thought it was just really interesting, not something that you ever really hear about. Definitely exotic vet problems. So getting into the physiology of reptiles, how their body works, they're also cold-blooded. So just like amphibians, they need a light source. They have dry, scaly skin, scaly, hear that? They can have bony skeleton scales or horny plates that will cover their body. So kind of how we see like the little spikes here, almost like they're kind of little horns. Or bearded dragon snake, an even better example. So reptiles have scales, amphibians do not. That is like one of the primary differences. Other reptiles include like crocodiles, obviously alligators, lizards, snakes, turtles, tortoises. So we didn't talk about turtles or tortoises, but they are included in the reptile category. Fun fact on turtles and tortoises is that they don't change their shell. Their shell grows with them. So their shell is literally a part of them. Look up a turtle skeleton when you have free time. And then some they can give birth 3 different ways reptiles can. They can give birth by laying eggs, oviparous. So that's what that chameleon was. Others will hold the eggs in their body until they hatch and give birth to live young. So basically the eggs are going to sit in their body, the eggs are going to hatch within the body, and then they're going to be born alive. This is called oviviparous. So ovo meaning egg, and then vivi meaning live birth. So the egg, then born live. Basically a combination of this first one and this last one. Others will develop in a placental sac and are born alive. So this is kind of like how humans are born. So lay eggs, live birth, combination of the two. I don't even know if this link is still working. This link is like 2 years old. This is just a Facebook video on snake births. Sweet. All right, so we're gonna watch this. All right. So a little bit on how snakes give birth. This does go for most all reptiles or amphibians. So when it comes to taking care of these animals as pets, there's huge differences between the species, but the goal should always be for you to give them an environment that is as close to what they would have in the wild as possible. We already talked about like snakes and how if they don't have that environment that allows them to not be stressed out, they're not going to live. Aquariums make really good containers because they're completely see-through. And if you've ever seen like Miss Joyner's tank for Nagini, she's like glued stuff up there so that she can kind of create all these different, not levels, but different things for Nagini to climb on without the things moving everywhere. Depending on your reptile or amphibian, you may want like a semi-aquatic tank where there's some water in there for them that isn't just like a drinking bowl, and there's some land in there. Again, reptiles, ectotherms, cold-blooded, they don't produce their own body heat. They need a light or something to make sure that they don't get too cold. Reptiles need UV lights, ultraviolet rays, so that their body is able to metabolize and absorb calcium to help make sure that their bones are strong. The UV rays also help them to form pigment for color and synthesize vitamin D, which is also really important for bone development. If you don't have a UV light, then you can use fluorescent lights. You just have to make sure that there's not glass between the light and the reptile. So if you put the light on top of the tank, you can't have glass in between because that glass is going to filter the UV rays out. And then your reptile's going to be warm, yeah, but they're not going to have those UV rays for calcium, vitamin D, and pigment. Diseases, I think this is like literally the only slide we have on diseases. One of the main ones that you need to worry about, if your mama didn't tell you about it when you were a kid, my mom sure did. If you ever touch any kind of reptiles or amphibians, snakes, turtles, lizards, any of that, because we had all of it, then you gotta wash your hands immediately afterwards because the salmonella bacteria thrives on reptiles and amphibians. And if you're out here touching your turtle doing whatever, then you're like, oh, I want a snack. And you gotta eat. And you're just like going and get all that bacteria in your mouth. Salmonella, it affects your digestive tract. You're gonna feel awful. It's like food poisoning. So basically, wash your hands. Mouth rot is another disease that reptiles or amphibians can get. It's a fungal disease, so as long as you keep tank and everything clean, you shouldn't have to worry about it. But with mouth rot, the fungus affects a mouth, and you'll start to see like sores and open wounds on the animal's mouth. And then mites. Even though reptiles and amphibians don't have hair, they can still get mites and ticks. But normally you're not gonna like actually notice them until there's so many that it's like you can't not see them. You can see anemia, anorexia, depression, stress, listlessness, where like your animal just doesn't want to move around, they don't want to eat, and they can end up possibly dying. So you just gotta treat them for mites. So what you guys are gonna do, I'm gonna open up the assignment. So y'all are gonna be using this right here. Directions on this side, but it's relatively straightforward. You are gonna pick some kind of fish, some kind of amphibian, some kind of reptile. Reptile, amphibian, reptile, fish. Freshwater, saltwater for the fish. Turtle, tortoise. So the difference between a turtle and a tortoise is very similar to the difference between a frog and a toad. One of them lives on land, one of them lives in water. Turtle lives in water. Tortoise, strictly on land. If you throw a tortoise in the water, they're gonna drown. So Don't do that. If you ever do decide to rescue a turtle, you can put them near water, but don't just like chunk them in. Because I've seen like very sad videos where like they're literally a girl takes a tortoise and she's like, "Oh, I'm saving him," and then she throws him in the water. Yeah, that happened. So turtle, tortoise, some kind of snake. If you want to do reptiles. And then for amphibians, you can do like a lizard, salamander kind of deal. Frog, toad, that you just want to put whatever you want right here. Compare and contrast like how they live, their habitat as a pet. What kind of food do they eat? How often do they eat? Colors that they come in, size, specific care things. So this is a triple Venn diagram, but it works very similar to a regular, like a standard 2 Venn diagram. You're just gonna have to create your text boxes, put them in here, type, whatever. In this outer circle, and this outer circle, you put things that are just for whatever it is. Here, you only put things for fish. You put whatever fact it is that applies to fish, and it doesn't apply to amphibians or reptiles. So it could be like, if you do saltwater fish, it could be they require saltwater. Amphibians and reptiles, they don't. In this circle right here, you put similarities between fish and amphibians. In this circle, you put similarities between amphibians and reptiles. So you cold-blooded, they're both cold-blooded. In this circle, you put things that are similar between fish and reptiles. And then in the middle, you put something that all 3 of them have in common. So it could be that all of them should have an environment very similar to their natural habitat. You want to try to hit on these points. You are welcome to stray from them. I would try to get like 1 or 2 bullets for each circle if you can. Nothing crazy, nothing drastic. But this is our last lecture for Animal Science 2, small animal, y'all. After this lecture, your next assignment is going to be school net questions based on this unit. So there isn't going to be a lecture for it. Just keep in mind, Tuesday, Thursday, 1 o'clock, you can hop on Zoom. Feel free, say hello. Because I miss you guys. And I'm excited I'll get to see most of y'all next year. Congrats to the seniors, though, for making it through the craziest senior year I've ever seen. I'm really proud of you guys. Bye, y'all.